Welcome to the SWIKE podcast, the only podcast that shares the stuff you didn't know you needed to know about jobs, careers, and life. The SWIKE podcast, the stuff I wish I knew earlier.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the SWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the podcast. I'm really happy to bring forth another guest that's going to share her wisdom and experience, mostly from the HR perspective, but she has a lot of different areas where she can lend her perspectives. But thanks, Nora, for joining us. And we'll get into a little bit more of your background, but if you can give us a little bit of a perspective of what you're doing now, and then we'll get into more of like what we were like as a kid growing up, whether you loved HR, and maybe a few parts of the road of the journey to get here. So if you can start off with a bit of what you're doing now, and then we'll get into more about your background later.
Thanks, Vicky. You're gonna make me go back and relive some of my childhood secrets. I'm joking. I'm currently an HR business partner at Enbridge. Been with the organization for about 3 years, and during my time at Enbridge, I've worked as an HR generalist and a talent acquisition advisor, and now as of recently, I've gotten the opportunity to be a HR business partner.
That's amazing. And yeah, hopefully we don't get into the skeletons of the closet or anything that you don't want to. But I do like to give folks a bit of perspective of like how they were like kind of growing up, and oftentimes how you were as a kid might be relevant to how the audience members were growing up. And if they can draw some parallels, then it was good. So if you can kind of go back to as far back as you want to go, but like what were you like as a kid? Were you always drawn into HR? Was that always something that you wanted to do, like being people oriented, or how are you influenced by like your parents or your family or whatever around you? So getting folks a bit of perspective on that would be awesome.
Sure. My experience actually as a kid and thinking about what I wanted to be when I grew up is completely different than where I actually am now. So as a young kid, I was actually very reserved and quiet, actually. Okay. I just loved the arts and getting my hands dirty in anything creative. So I had always thought that I would pursue something creative for my career. I just had a natural talent for arts. I was a great drawer, painter, and I had even gotten to the point where I learned to sew and was designing and making my own outfits. But coming from an immigrant family that had sacrificed a lot for me to have the opportunity to be educated in Canada, I felt the pressure to move into a more conventional path for my university education, something more practical, but I could never see myself pursuing something that was like science or engineering. So I enrolled in business at Ted Rogers. I figured business had a ton of majors, and I could kind of figure out where I fit in after the first year. And during my first year, at that point, I still didn't know that I wanted to be in HR. I had enrolled and I thought, okay, well, I am a super creative person. And I thought, well, maybe marketing could be a good fit for me because there's that creativity aspect. You have a lot of advertising, and some of the more cutting courses were my favorite in my first year. But then I fell in love with organizational behavior. So that was the first HR course that I got exposure to. And it made me fall in love with the psychology behind HR. And I looked at it as the psychology of the business. And there's a lot of ways where you can actually get creative within HR with all of the programs and processes that we help design for organizations. So long story short, I fell in love with HR because of that psychology piece. And I majored in it and I have been loving it. So I haven't looked back. So that's kind of my not very straight path to majoring in HR and working in HR.
Yeah, and if you're willing to share a little bit more, I think a lot of folks might resonate with what you said about going one path and then feeling pressures from family, from culture, and whatever. So can you talk a little bit more about that experience, like as you were kind of navigating like your interest in like creativity and drawing and like fashion design or whatever, making your own clothes, and then saying, okay, now I got to do something more kind of traditional, conventional, the typical like doctor, lawyer, accountant, engineer come to mind, and that you had those. So how did you kind of deal with that? So was there like a period where you kind of introspected and had to do that, or was it just kind of a mandate from your parents, or like tell us a little bit about that period if you can go into that.
Yeah, so I mean, I come from a family of professionals. So my father's an engineer. My mom had her university degree and her master's, and all of my extended family, they're all professionals. So they're either accountants, doctors, lawyers, etc., as you mentioned. And there was almost like an expectation that wasn't said to go into something that's a little bit more conventional. I think that if I had chosen a creative path for whether it was college or university or whatever, I think that my parents would have still supported me. But I felt that pressure to conform and follow in the footsteps of everybody in my family and what I thought they would be proud of for me. Having said that, I've always also been just personally somebody that, gravitated towards business. If it wasn't going to be the arts or doing something creative, it was going to be business. I did look at the possibility of merging business with some kind of art. So at Ryerson, there was retail management, for example, and that was almost like a window to the fashion and creative realm. I also looked at, how do you become an art dealer, for example, right? Because that's business with art, and even Ryerson at some point had a major that was fashion and business focused outside of the Ted Rogers program. But ultimately, and I think maybe as the oldest child in my family, I did feel the responsibility and the pressure to go into something that's a little bit more conventional. But what I told myself was that if I did want to get creative and if I did crave that within my career, that there's always the opportunity in HR to work in any industry, right? So I could have always worked in a creative-based industry. And I think that being a creative individual is always an added strength if you use it in your work. So like I had mentioned, some of the projects that I really get excited about is creating talent programs, because you really get creative on how you market it, how this talent program is going to work. So creating different types of initiatives and programs within HR, whether that's in talent management, recruitment, diversity, inclusion, gives me that opportunity to get creative without dedicating myself in a creative space. Looking back at it now, I am happy with the decision I made, just because I feel that my career right now is fulfilling for me. My brother, however, did pursue a creative degree, so I also get a little bit of a snapshot and a window to that life. So yeah, I think right now I kind of got the best of both worlds.
Cool. So you can kind of live vicariously through your brother a little bit. So the
exactly. And now that I see it and I see how technical things are, I think maybe this isn't really what I thought it was going to be. And I'm kind of happy about what I stuck with, because yeah, it can get very technical and very tedious, which is great for some people, but I don't know if that is what I had envisioned when I wanted to go into something creative when I was younger.
I think that's a great perspective, because it shows how like someone kind of aspired to be one thing and then made a choice to be another thing, but you had the opportunity to have your brother kind of take that path, and you say, maybe it's the grass is greener type of thing, and maybe it wasn't as green as you thought. But can you walk us through a little bit of your journey through kind of the business program? So you initially thought like retail management, art dealer, fashion design, and then marketing and stuff like that, and then like HR, like how do you find HR, and then how does that kind of turn into like your full career and stuff like that? So how does that happen?
Yeah, so like I said, when I went in, I initially thought of different options before HR, and when I took that first HR course, I fell in love with the fact that a lot of people think of HR as just the people business, but it really is the psychology behind the business and the people. And for me, that was super interesting and very mentally stimulating. So I majored in HR, but my journey actually in engineering, my journey actually in Ryerson is quite a bumpy one. So when I think about my journey to where I started and how I was, there was a lot of bumps, and I'm thankful for that, because I feel like if you don't go through that, you'll never actually learn or grow. So my first year at Ryerson, actually, and this was before I majored in HR. It was actually one of the biggest failures and lessons learned in my life to date. I had just come back from where my parents are originally from, Egypt. I had spent my high school in Egypt, and I came to Toronto to Ryerson, and I was very homesick. And I was having trouble adjusting to my new life in Toronto and the university system in Canada. And as a result of, the state of my mental health, the lack of understanding of just the university system and how, GPAs work, and my own personal motivation at that time, not being 100%, into business at that point, I actually landed myself on probation in the first semester.
Okay.
And I was required to withdraw in my second semester. And I would say that was one of the biggest turning points for me right now in my life, and getting me to graduate to Ryerson for that fear of not being able to graduate with a university degree, like everybody in my family. And during that time out of school, that's where I got the opportunity to take some extra business courses outside, and look at all of my options within business. And after I took some business courses, I got a part-time job, and I pled my case to the Ryerson admissions. They accepted me back to the program. And that's when I got an opportunity to take additional courses. That's when I took the OB course, and that's when I majored. So that's a little bit about, my journey within university, and how it wasn't always the smoothest road at the beginning, unsure of my major, having academic issues in the first year, and then getting back in and getting back on track.
Interesting. So one thing that stuck up to me is I had a recent conversation with someone talking about part-time jobs as really a foundational element that she recommends pretty much anybody, even in university, even in high school, to have a part-time job, because it just has that kind of eye-opening effect on things. And obviously yours was in a different context, but would you kind of echo that, or would you have a different perspective in terms of how a part-time job kind of allowed you to now partake in the working world and saying, okay, this is how it is, whether it's something as simple as like retail, or like quick serve at a restaurant or something like that. But what was your experience from a part-time job perspective?
Yeah, so during that time where I was trying to get back into Ryerson, and when I did get my first part-time job, it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about time management. And as a kid, I've always been a shy and reserved person, and it got me out of my shell. I worked in retail and kind of got my first taste of sales. And it just taught me a lot of responsibility, time management, and also made me, increase my motivation to go back to school. Because I didn't want to do sales for the rest of my life. I didn't want to do that specific type of sales. So it taught me basic life skills, and also gave me perspective on, what do I really want to achieve in my life, and how do I want to focus, and what would be my next steps moving forward. So I think I think the earlier you can get that opportunity to have a part-time job, the better. If I do have children in the future, definitely will be trying to get them a part-time job even as early as high school. I think it builds a lot of good basic life skills, and I didn't have that going into university, which I think might have hindered me a little bit from being able to manage all of the stress and my struggles with time management could have been alleviated if I had already had those skills.
And you talked a little bit about being kind of shy and reserved during like your childhood, and then obviously the part-time job helped you get out of your shell. But was it kind of like an instantaneous I was shy one day and kind of like outgoing the next, or like how was the journey, or what were some of the helpful tidbits for folks that are kind of in that kind of reserved, more shy state? How would you or what would you recommend to them to kind of get out of their shell, other than just get a part-time job in retail or something like that?
Yeah.
Are there other things that kind of helped you in that journey?
I mean, it's progressive, right? I as a child, I was very shy and reserved, and in high school, I started to open up a little bit when I found my friends group, and having that first sales job really did help me become more comfortable in speaking, publicly with people that I didn't know at all. I think it's progressive. I think that self-awareness is the first step, right? If you've identified that, you do want to get better at being able to socialize and make connections and build relationships with people that might not be in your intimate circle. I think that identifying that is the first step, and putting yourself in positions and opportunities to help you develop that a little bit further. So I noticed that I also, and to this day, always have a fear of public speaking, for example. So during university, I actively tried to participate in case competitions. At work right now, I still struggle with public speaking around different types of audiences. So I've actively put that as a development, and I've spoken to my people leader, and I will actively put myself in opportunities and positions where I am forced to public speak, as much as I don't like it. So I think if people are shy and reserved, and they want to improve that, or they want to develop that skill where they can turn on their communication and their public speaking, I think that putting yourself in opportunities for that growth in different areas, either personal or your professional or your school life, is good. So, for example, if in your personal life you feel like you're a little shy, and you're reserved, but you do want to get to know people, reach out to your network and see if you can go out within your group of individuals with one of the friends that you already know, right? So it's looking for those opportunities in different buckets and areas in your life.
But what I'm taking from that is kind of leveraging your situation that you're in right now, and kind of saying, well, in the university situation, so things like case competitions or groups of friends reaching out and using that time to experiment a little bit, right? So you have different groups of friends that you can tap into. Like, yes, you can stay with the same group of friends all the time, but once in a while, it's good to explore. And then as you kind of graduate in the working world, even leveraging your management and your leaders to say, hey, I would love these opportunities. If you can put me in those opportunities, then that would be helpful too. So it's a never-ending journey to kind of improve. So would you mind sharing that? So you're going through university, you found HR and organization behavior, and then did you have like something waiting for you when you graduated? Like, were you one of those people who, yep, I have like a couple of terms left and I already have a job waiting for me? Or were you one of those people who like, oh crap, I got my diploma and now I'm like, now what do I do?
Yeah. So, I mean, my story is, again, a little different because, so I had a opportunity actually to work at a solar company. It was a startup, and this was while I was in school. So this was about, I'd say, my third official year, but because I had lost that year after I was required to withdraw, it was really my second year. So I got the opportunity to work part-time at a startup solar company, and it was in HR. It was as an HR/admin assistant. And I got the opportunity. It was a referral through one of my contacts. So I started working there part-time. I figured it would be good to get that on my resume. The company grew, and the company experienced massive growth after about a year that I started. And as a result, they actually offered me a full-time role, still in HR, but with more responsibility. They had hired a HR manager at the time. And so what I did was I started to work at that organization full-time, 9 to 5, while I was in school. Wow. And I continued my education, also full-time, but a mix of night classes, online, Saturday, and summer schools. So I did that up until I graduated, and I had a promotion at that company waiting for me. When I graduated, they gave me the role of talent acquisition manager for their sales team at the time. So I didn't have, like a role lined up because due to an internship or campus recruitment. My path was a little bit different. It started while I was in university.
Cool. And what I took away from that is try to find a company and hope that they grow massively so that you have a job while you're working / when you're ready to kind of graduate. But that's probably not too typical, but that is great that it happened. And then you mentioned kind of talent acquisition, and then can you walk us from kind of talent acquisition to kind of present day? How was that journey? And then hopefully we'll get into topics in future episodes to dive deep into each one of those topics.
Yeah. So, I mean, working at that startup within talent acquisition, I got a ton of recruitment experience in, all different types of roles and at all different levels. I got recruitment experience recruiting for really tough to fill roles. So, actively reaching out to passive candidates, hosting, events, trying to recruit and expand at an exponential rate nationally, because at some point that organization had grown to open up offices and locations throughout Alberta, and then some locations also in the States. So I learned a lot on how to recruit passive candidates, how to recruit for different types of roles, and how to build a scalable recruitment model. So that was really interesting. And I even got the opportunity to work with some recruitment agencies as well to support with that. So that was my experience there. Learned a lot, definitely a lot of work, but I learned a lot. And then when I left that startup organization and joined Enbridge, which is a much larger, more established company, I also started in the recruitment department, but it was different. At that point, you aren't working for a company that is experiencing massive growth. You're working for a much more established organization, but the type of roles are different. Some roles were still equally as difficult to fill because they were in certain IT departments, or they were fulfilling certain IT implementation contracts that we had. I had also taken on the responsibility for recruitment at Enbridge for a lot of our student programs. So for example, our EIT rotational program, our co-op program, and our summer students program. Now, that, although not very fast-paced recruitment, the recruitment programs are a lot more complex. The recruitment process can be a lot more lengthy, a lot more, there's a lot more steps to it. The assessment is different. So again, learned a lot from there as well, and learned how different types of organizations and different sizes recruit differently, and their processes differently, and the interview process and the application process can completely differ, and how people tailor their approach when they're applying to different types of companies, right? And a company like Enbridge is so large that you might not be able to build a personal connection with somebody in that department that's in leadership, right? Which you want as a candidate, versus a smaller company when I was working at the solar company. It was small enough that you might actually be able to network and build a personal connection via LinkedIn with one of their executives, right? So different approaches, and I've seen candidates do different things. So it's a great learning opportunity to kind of compare and contrast the two as well. So.
Cool. And then a lot of folks, when they think about HR, they say, "Oh, that's recruiting," right? And HR is obviously more than that. So how did you? Because now you're more of a business partner and have moved out of recruiting into other things. So what was the transition to that part like?
Yeah. So I always knew going into Enbridge that I wanted to transition out of talent acquisition. I was really good at it, but there's more to HR than just recruitment, right? Like you said, there are other areas like, HR advisory or the HR generalist position, which I was in, where typically you're aligned to clients, and you do have almost everything A to Z HR. That doesn't include recruiting. So it's a lot of performance management, workforce planning. There's a lot of labor relations. There's succession planning, talent development. So that's kind of the HR generalist area, and then just providing day-to-day HR advisory advice to your client groups, right? And then there's compensation, which is another area of HR. There's labor relations. So these individuals in HR specifically specialize and deal with unions and unionized groups. There is pension and benefits, which I know nothing about, but they sit with us, and it's HR. There's talent development. There is HR solutions that deals with our HR technology and analytics, right? So there's so many different types of pockets within HR, and me being in talent acquisition, going into HR advisory, and now the HR business partner, I don't even think that I've really touched, half of all of the different roles and groupings within HR, really. But what I'd say is, if somebody is in HR as their career, recruitment is a really good basis to have, and it's a good way to get your foot in the door, and learn a lot about your business. HR, the generalist role, is also an excellent role to get in to learn about the different types of areas within HR, because you touch it at a very surface level, and learn what you like and what you don't like. And then the HR business partner role, again, is very similar to the generalist role, but only thinking a little bit more strategically and long term, and taking a more consultative approach with clients. So it's definitely, I definitely recommend those three areas for people that still aren't sure if they want to specialize and laser focus in HR and are still just open to learning.
And I think that gives folks a good perspective in terms of your background and things that you've worked on and different parts of HR. Because yeah, a lot of folks say that, oh, I'm going to HR thinking it's this one small thing, but meanwhile there's so much to it, and similar to like accounting and finance and stuff. Each of them are large on their own as well. But if you could kind of give yourself a few pieces of SWIKE, the stuff I wish I knew earlier. So from your overall career perspective, you could go back and to give yourself some advice in whatever stage that you think is relevant. So maybe before kind of that first term, maybe, or maybe you wish that it still happened, and then afterwards, or what are some of the key stuff that you wish you knew earlier that you'd give yourself if you had the chance?
Yeah, I'd say, there's maybe 3 points that really come to mind. One is, never give up on anything. Maintain resilience and determination. If you don't achieve something one time around, learn, adapt, and try again. That's the only real way you're gonna move forward and succeed in the face of adversity. Another thing I'd tell myself is, don't wait to make the perfect decision. Just make the best decision based on the information provided in front of you. And don't put yourself under stress and anxiety about, your future career and your next steps. It wastes a lot of energy to worry about things before they even happen, if they even happen. Rather focus that energy on learning and acquiring, the knowledge and skills that will make you more well-rounded as an individual and a professional. And through that acquisition of knowledge, you'll be able to pivot and find your way, and make the right decision for your next steps in your career.
That's amazing. I think that's a lot of great and useful insights. And yeah, I think I would love to have you back on future episodes to dive deep into more things, because a lot of our audience, I'm sure, would love to pick your brain on like the student programs and summer programs and getting into that. And then maybe talking a little bit more on HR, at least the parts of HR that you've touched already, kind of like the pros and cons, what you like, what you didn't like. And it's your perspective and experience, but I think it would be useful for that. And then any other things, because I know we talked about your interest in like D&I, diversity and inclusion and things like that, and whatever other topics that might be interesting to you. So thanks so much, Nora, for coming on and sharing your insights and perspectives, and look forward to chatting a little bit more and getting to know more about you and your experiences.
Thanks for having me, Luki. It's great.
Take care. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on the SWIKE, Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the podcast. If you like the podcast, please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you found this podcast. And if you can give us a review, that would be very appreciated. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn at Lukidanu, Lukidanu, and the same on most social media platforms. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Bye.